And the story starts back in 1967.
The head of BBC Radio back then was a chap called Frank Gillard. He had a grand master plan to satisfy the public needs, local radio.
We are quite certain that local life is something very important. Most people are just as interested in what goes on in their own communities as they are in national or even international affairs.
His dream was to deliver modern journalism centred around the interests of the local communities. It was simple, it was brilliant. There was just one problem.
With an estimated yearly running cost of £50,000 each, where would the money come from?
The BBC was in no position to fund this venture with the licence fees, so money had to be sought further afield. And 8 local authorities from Sheffield to Merseyside came up trumps. They offered to fund this experimental radio in their areas for a trial period of 2 years.
So the race was on, which would be the first station to get on air and set the benchmark for others.
BBC Radio Leicester hit the airwaves on the 8th of November 1967, making a bit of history there. Britain's first mainland local radio station.
And what a day. We've had the Postmaster General to open the station, the Lord Mayor of Leicester's had a say, and we've got more visitors in the studio this afternoon. During the next 50-odd minutes or so, we'll be hearing from some of our opening day personalities.
Ken Warburton was a programme assistant at BBC Radio Leicester and was there as it made its first broadcasts.
It was an exciting day. It was the culmination of a lot of preparation, quite a lot of hard work from months before, and finally we were there.
Britain's first experimental local radio station, Radio Leicester, went on the air about a quarter of an hour ago.
I had a double learning curve. I had to learn not only all the techniques of radio, but just basically talking on the wireless.
Sure, but it's also all the technical skills.
We did it all, yes. There were no producers, there were no technicians.
No.
You drove a desk, you opened up controls, you set up the microphones. You did everything. But you'd also have individual commitments. And I had to produce a countryside programme, a programme for the blind, for the visually impaired, and also a gardening programme.
So it's a complete mixed bag for everybody.
My budget for the gardening programme was, I think, £3, 10 shillings. And that was considered quite good, actually.
You've got to be creative with a budget like that.
To be honest, a lot of people came in and did stuff because they were local and had a commitment to the area.
Yes.
And just as well they did, because there's no way we could have afforded to have paid contributors.
Well, I'll flash right round to my next request, which is from Julie Howard of 18 Foss Road, North Leicester. She says, "Dear Mr. Warburton," very formal, "my parents celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary. Will you please play The Seekers singing Island of Dreams for them?" Well, all our congratulations from here at Radio Leicester, and here's The Seekers with Island of Dreams.
With the best of the will in the world, it would have been a very small audience.
It could be a little more professional, I think. You know, we get the odd, faux pas on the radio, going through.
I don't think it's very good or that good. Not as good as Radio 1.
Nothing wrong with it as far as I'm concerned. I just don't want it.
The initial response to the local radio stations was a little bit mixed. BBC London seemed a little cynical about the project. And at the same time, commercial radio stations were really taking off. And the staff in all the regional outlets feared that the government may lose interest in the whole scheme.
The pressure was on. This was a race against time. Local radio only had 2 years to prove itself, and a huge amount was riding on this. Station manager Owen Bentley knows all too well the challenges faced by the 8 experimental stations in the early days.
When we started, we were probably not the most wanted child within the BBC. Obviously, Frank Gillard, who was the founder of local radio, had a vision of it, but there was a lot of opposition. People were trying to do us down, calling us Toy Town Radio and so on, because we were all learning on the job. We had a basic vision of local radio, and the vision was, essentially that the BBC would supply the skeleton and the community would provide all the flesh and the programming on it and so on. In the evening, we had a host of programs, little 15-minute programs, which had been made by members of the community. These are people that we trained who came in and did their own thing, a program on steam, for example, here at Leicester, which ran for years and years with volunteers. A youth program, music programs and so on, and maybe a local DJ coming in. So you might run a schedule up to about 9 o'clock, but huge gaps in the day where we took Radio 2.
The hard work, creativity and dedication of the radio crew and the local community began to pay off, and the station's popularity increased.
There was every chance that we wouldn't get a big enough audience to make an impact. Luckily we did, and I suppose by the end of the 2 years we felt it was going to be secure.
If you can say that in the whole range of newspaper journalism there's room for the local newspaper, and there certainly is, I read mine every week from cover to cover, you must also admit that there's place in the whole span of broadcasting for the local radio station.
I think it's very good because it gives you information on what's happening and where you can go to be entertained, and gives you the local news.
But we really enjoy listening to it. I listen to it really every morning.
So 2 years on, the experiment was finally deemed a success, and the government gave the BBC the go-ahead for a further 20 radio stations, this time funded with the licence fee.
BBC Radio Leicester, it's 10:10 then, Friday morning. Jim Davis with you through until midday today.
46 years on, the radio station is a true success story. It now has 15 presenters. It broadcasts 52 different shows covering various topics each week, which delights around 175,000 listeners. It's absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much, BBC Radio Leicester. Flog It would not be the same without you. Right, it's time for me to plug the show. Here goes.